Consciousness Studies program has a history of over 25 years at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. It's one of the oldest programs started by Dr. Raja Ramanna, and at that time the idea of consciousness was an issue which only had started getting attention at an international level. Prof. B.V. Sreekantan was the first person who has introduced many of us to the idea of consciousness. Dr. Ramanna invited Prof. Sreekantan to join the institute as a faculty at that time, and he joined the institute and he started making a literature review of the idea, the concept and the problem. And one of the earliest issues which was found was that consciousness is a topic which can be discussed only in the context of science, philosophy, humanities and arts. So today, if I look back, Consciousness Studies program is one of the most vibrant programs of this institute. Many people have joined, all started by one person, Prof. B.V. Sreekantan. But today we have a lot of young people buzzing with ideas and very excited about a lot of issues. Nithin Nagaraj is one of our young faculties and perhaps the leader to lead this program in the future. So we thought it's appropriate to have a conversation between the person who started the program and another individual who is going to look at this whole idea of consciousness and its implications for the future in perhaps a fresh light, and both from the angle of philosophy and science. Today is a fascinating morning where we present a conversation and a dialogue between Prof. B.V. Sreekantan, the founder of Consciousness Studies program at National Institute of Advanced Studies, and Dr. Nithin Nagaraj, who is an associate professor with this program. Dr. Nithin.
Good morning. It's indeed a great honor and privilege to be talking to you, sir. I would like to begin by asking you about your early years, growing up with your illustrious father, Sri B.V. Pandit. He's a household name in Ayurvedic endeavors. So could you please tell us a bit about your childhood and your growing up, your early years?
You see, according to me, in the life of any person, there are three factors which are important. The first I call luck, which according to me is nothing other than divine grace. The second factor is opportunity. And the third one is your own effort. In my life, all the three have been very positive. I was exceedingly lucky in being born in a rich family of Ayurvedic doctors and surrounded by highly intellectual atmosphere, because my brothers were all highly educated, and then so it was a very progressive kind of house in which I was born, which helped me quite a lot in my own studies and how I came up in my life. My father, of course, was quite the contrary. He had a very, he belonged to a very poor family, and his father, he lost his father before he was born. He was a and my grandmother, all the credit goes to her. Brought him up, made him an Ayurvedic graduate, and then he started an Ayurvedic factory in Nanjangud, which in a matter of 10-15 years became very successful. And he was able to, from poverty, he became a fairly rich person. And during actually the First World War years, his Ayurvedic medicines became very popular. And that is where he was able to sell in large quantities the medicines for influenza and for some of the very peculiar diseases at that time in India, because it was, I don't know the reason why influenza was such a prevalent and dangerous disease during those days. And his medicines worked very well. He also started making tooth powder, and Nanjangud tooth powder became very famous And there was a time when we used to make 30,000 packets a day, kind of. Today the number has decreased because most of the people use toothpaste. We also make toothpaste in same factory. So I had a very good background in my life to start with. Then the schools in Najangood were very good. Then I went to Mysore for my intermediate studies. Then I moved to Bangalore. I got into Central College, physics honors. So physics honors, of course, you know, during those days was a difficult subject, but again depended very much on the teachers. And we had excellent teachers. Again, that is my luck. So I feel that whatever I have been able to achieve is part of that divine grace. So
your interest in science and philosophy was also rooted in your the schooling and the culture around you.
You see, in our house, I was very early. I was taught Sanskrit, and then I used to listen to lectures on Bhagavad Gita, because my father was highly religious, and also he believed in philosophy quite a bit, particularly Gita philosophy. So he used to arrange a lecture by a professional from Mysore, from the college or from other institutions, to give lectures on Gita. So as a young boy, I was exposed to quite a lot. But though, you know, at the age of 10 to 15 years, you absorb certain things, but their effect is not so much. And it so happened that when I came to Bangalore, one of the teachers there in the physics honors course, he took a lot of interest in me, and he made me commit the entire Bhagavad Gita by heart. What he would do is ask me, don't start with Dharmakshetra, Kurukshetra, which is the first, but I will tell you where to begin. So he prescribed the 15th chapter, which is the one that later on Sangeetha used for her thesis, I came to know. And I would commit every day 2 slokas, and then a day after finishing that, I was supposed to repeat the same thing before him by heart. So this way I got a lot of training in Bhagavad Gita, and he would explain the meaning of each and every sloka. Also it happened that because of my eldest brother's interest in philosophy, we had a lot of books on Indian philosophy. And I had another brother who was quite the contrary. He studied in Banaras University. He was a Marxist. So we had books on Marxist philosophy, or in fact some of them were proscribed books for those. So this had given me a certain interest and background in philosophy. Then, you know, after I finished my honors, I went to Bombay to do my PhD. Then for 45 years, I had forgotten all this, bid a goodbye to them, got into real physics.
So how did your transition from doing top-class physics research into consciousness, how did that transition happen?
Yeah, that I think is again another luck in my... you see, when I was to retire from TIFR, I was there for 44 years, from 1948 to 1992. And I went through various stages. Finally, I retired as director of TIFR. And then for 5 years, I was there as a Srinivas Ramanujan Professor of Indian National Science Academy. And I was to retire in 1992. So it so happened I came to Bangalore. And of course, Dr. Rajaramanna was a good friend of mine for a long time. He came back from London sometime in 1950, 58 or so. From then I knew him very well. He first joined TIFR and then went to Atomic Energy. And I knew him very well. So I just came to Bangalore. And when I was about to retire from TIFR, I had corresponded with MIT. And then they had offered me a position there for 2 years to do work on a satellite, because I had worked with them on a satellite project. So I had committed myself to that. So when I came here in 1992, I was about to go back to United States for about 2 years. And then Dr. Rajaramana casually asked me, what is your plan after retirement? I said, I'm going to US for 2 years. Both my sons have gone away there for higher education. One is in physics, the other is in mathematics. So I'll also spend a few years there, then come back and retire in Bangalore. He said, you are not going to do that. I have taken the responsibility for running this new institution, and J.R.D. Tata forced me to take this, and I want you to help me to build this institution. Professor M.N. Srinivas and Professor Sundaram, they have agreed to join. So let us all join together and build this institution. And then I said, look, I have already committed myself to go to MIT and they will be unhappy about it. He said, you can join and after some time you go for a year, or you can't go for 2 years, but you can go for a year. That's what I did. I came here, joined the institute, and then of course came the question of what I'm going to do here. And it so happened that in the last few months of my stay in TIFR, I had come across 2 books. One is Penrose's book, The Emperor's New Mind, and the other one was by a professor by the name of Squires on physics and consciousness. So I had read these 2 books. So this was working in my mind that maybe I should renew my old interest in philosophy and try to see whether I can use my present knowledge of physics in a variety of areas, astrophysics and physics, for philosophy. So I told Dr. Rajaramana that, look, I will work on philosophy of science with particular emphasis on consciousness studies. And this field is just opening up. And I don't know whether, he said immediately that you can't do any experimental work. He knew that I was just out and out an experimentalist. So you can't do any experimental work here, but you can do the philosophy aspect of it, there's no problem. So I said, okay. Then, after a little hesitation, I agreed to come and join here. And I thought it would be only for a short time. Because I remember I joined here Professor Kapoor, who was the deputy director of NIAS at that time. He was in NIMHANS. And he asked me casually in one of these rooms, what do you want to do here? I said, I'm going to study consciousness. He laughed. And he said, how much time do you have? I said, this position which NIAS has given me is for 5 years. So I hope to stick on for 5 years. He said, yes, go ahead, you will scratch the problem. But that is true. I mean, the consciousness, I never knew that it was such a deep, because just beginning. Scientific study of consciousness started only in the 1990s, probably a little earlier. And that's how I got into the consciousness studies.
So that was the beginning of the consciousness studies program in NIAS.
Yeah.
So how would you sort of trace the activities of the program in NIAS?
See, first thing I did was to study whatever books were there and all that. I prepared a report, current status of consciousness studies. And then Dr. Rajaramana looked at it and said, excellent, you give a talk. So the first talk here in this room, which is now the lecture hall. The lecture hall was, where? That was the lecture hall of that time, actually, his dining room. There. He said, you give a talk on that, on consciousness. The first, what they called associates program talk was given by me on conscious studies before I went to America. See, I left to United States in March 1993 and came back only on the 1st of 1994. Those 9 months I spent at MIT again and other places. So that is when I was able to see what actually has been done by the neuroscientists in the field. All beginning, consciousness studies. And there were hardly any books. And just then, a journal called Journal of Consciousness Studies started appearing. The first few issues were very useful to us because so I used to keep track of the developments in the field of consciousness studies. And then in 1994, I came back in 1994 I came back. And I think after a year or so, it so happened that Sangeetha had met Ramana through somebody who had come. And Ramana suggested, no, there is one lady who wants to come here and work. She has done her thesis on consciousness studies. I said, let her interview her. So here we interviewed her, and then that's how Sangeetha got into that. And after that, there was a letter from Sarukai. He had done physics PhD in the United States, and he had joined math science. And so he wrote a letter to Ramana saying that he wants to come and work in the area of philosophy at NIAS. So that application also we considered. And Dr. Ramana asked me to consult the director of math science at that time, whom I knew. And he said, look, he is brilliant. We expected him to do string theory here, but he seems to be doing other things. He is more interested in philosophy. So if you want to take him, kind of. So then, of course, Sarukai came here, and then he joined us. And a little later, Anindya Sinha, who was in the IISc, he was not very happy there for some reason. So he said he would like to come and do some work on animal consciousness and animal behavior. So that is how the first, and then M.G. Narasimhan, had come to NIAS through Dr. Nanjundaya. Nanjundaya, was in the Department of Bio in IISc. So he had recommended him. And MGN was a teacher in some, teaching in some college. And then, but he was interested in philosophy. So he also came, and then he was working for quite some time, part-time, and then we took him on. We have had, as you know, at least 4 international conferences and 2 national conferences. And it also happened that when we had the first national conference, we had people from all over India. And Professor Mukhopadhyaya, who was a very powerful man in Delhi at that time, and he was chairman of ICPR, Indian Council of Philosophical Research. He also came for the conference along with some others. Then, you see, he, after listening to some of us, he offered me a fellowship. You see, though I have been in NIAS for such a long time, only for the first 5 years, I was a fellow, I was a professor of Radhakrishnan professor of NIAS. The rest of the time, I have been Homi Baba fellow, senior fellow, and then this ICPR hello and all that. So, and he gave me a very good assignment. He said, you write a book on foundations of sciences. So I worked on that for 3 years and had several national workshops, and I got people from all over India. And that was also, and we would always discuss also about consciousness as one of the topics, but it was more importantly on the foundations of sciences.
What do you think is the role of science and philosophy in the understanding of consciousness? In particular, can you comment on the methodology of science and its advancement and its limitations, if any, in understanding consciousness?
You see, many people think that science will solve all the problems. While I am a scientist myself, and I have a lot of faith in what science does, I cannot say that science is designed to solve every problem. Science has still a lot of question marks to face itself actually. The whole idea of space, time, matter, everything has become a problem. But science has a certain way of looking at these things and convincing others that this scientific methodology works well. At least we know that the scientific methodology, as it has been pursued, has advanced quite a lot of technology. There is no question about it. And technology per se, in turn, has helped science quite a lot. Now we see because of pure science, all these advanced applications came, whether it is electronics or whether it is electromagnetic waves or whatever it is. All that came from pure theory to the applied, and it has done tremendous. See, you would not have had computers, you would not have had satellites, without all these development. That way the success of science is very well established. But the success of science in fundamental issues has been always a question. And in science we have followed what we call the reductionistic method. And we have gone quite deep into it. We have studied the structure of matter right down to the level of almost vacuum now. And on the other hand, we also have used science to understand the universe, both on the micro side through accelerators and things like that. We have gone to the smallest constitutions of matter. And on the other, in astrophysics, our whole idea of the universe has completely changed. And some of the important results that have come out in astrophysics have completely transformed our idea. And one of them particularly, that is the expansion of the universe that was observed at the around 1920s. See, that has given a lot of hopes as to how we can understand all this creation happened and how various stages and various phases of creation. So that research is going on, and it will go on because with improved technology, we are able to go understand deeper and deeper. But what is interesting to me is the philosophy that comes out of science today compared to what the philosophy was earlier. I mean, you see, philosophy has been the companion of physics for a very long time. And right from the time of Plato, then later on, there was a time when materialism dominated because of science. See, science was so successful that the feeling was created that science will be able to solve all the problems. So, and that is ultimately the universe consists of nothing but matter. But all those ideas have changed. Today we know that, on the other hand, going deep into the animal sciences, the evolutionary aspects of human beings and all the animals, we have, science has made a lot of progress. So there is hope on the one side that there will be a better understanding of everything around us. And but what is remarkable in my opinion is the ancient insights, you see, in many of these areas are proving right now as something that has thrown lot of light on many of the mysteries, whether it's about space or time or the universe creation. And what we have not been able to do in science still, which is still a mystery, is what is life, what is consciousness, how they arise, etc. I'm not sure whether these problems will be solved only by science, but certainly science and philosophy working together might help. At the same time, one cannot be sure that all the questions that we ask will be
In your opinion, what do you think is the future of consciousness studies in India and in the world? What are the key challenges and problems that are to be addressed by this community?
You see, consciousness studies will go on, but it has to go on in my opinion, in several directions. One direction, of course, is the reductionistic method that is being followed by the biologists, neuroscientists, going deeper and deeper into the structure of the brain and the various. But there, I feel the future, in my opinion, is if tomorrow we are able to construct a chemical machine rather than a computer. See, today the computer is made of electrical circuits. But the human body and the human brain and whatever else is entirely physico-chemical, not purely physical, not electrons and protons only, but chemicals have played a thing. So a new approach has to be taken, in my opinion, to try to see whether you can build a chemical machine which resembles the animal or the brain of human beings. I think that will be possible. That is what, that means then you will be dealing with enzymes, then you will be dealing with different type of assembly of chemicals, rather than trying to understand it purely in terms of pulses, which you are doing, neuronal pulses. We don't have any deeper understanding because we have not gone deeper into that. We know, for example, in the retina, the light falls and it gets converted to an electrical pulse. But in that process, there is a lot of chemical processes involved. And how the pulses come out of different regions of the retina and different wavelengths affect the. And also we don't know when we say that we are analyzing the brain, we are only looking at, with all the existing machines, release of chemicals. See, that's all that is. Pulses are created by the release of chemicals. But how exactly those chemicals and why in those particular, these are a very deep studies. It's not easy. But I think that's the direction in which science will go. Maybe not today, but tomorrow. You see, the point is that, as you know, the philosophers, not only in India, even outside, have tried to understand some of these questions, not in the scientific way, but in a more general way. And the general understanding leads to very important conclusions. That is about the power of the mind. See, by going to higher and higher states of the mind, you see, people are able to see things differently. This we all know. See, what we see in our dreaming state is very different from what we see in the, and how those things get constructed, how they, in a dream you get the same feeling as what you see in the waking state, and the deep sleep state is another mystery. And we don't remember what actually happens, but we do remember that there's a continuity of states. the moment we get up from the night, we get back to it. So these are things which we have not understood scientifically. And I think the philosophers have tried to look at it differently. And they have contributed a lot of ideas there. And there, I think the most important thing is analysis of the power of the mind. And they all come to the conclusion, mind has a lot to do with what we see, what we interpret, what kind of concept of space, time, and causality. All these are connected with our understanding of what happens in the mind. And mind, and then we even in science we depend upon experience. But we don't know how experience arises, how experience is stored. Memory is another important area in which science has not been able to make, that track will go on, there is no question about it. Now the other thing is, the whole question of artificial intelligence. There's another direction in which a lot of progress is going on. But there, as I said, my worry there is that there's a lot of difference between animal and human brain and a computer. A computer may be able to work faster and do many kind of calculations and faster, etc. But that may not lead us to the final understanding. But on the other hand, if you understand how the chemicals operate and whether we will be able to simulate, what happens in the human brain by a chemical apparatus, we come closer. That is my own personal. Causality is a very deep question. Causality everything must have a cause. That is our fundamental assumption. Now, in science, one is coming very peculiarly, particularly in physics, to a very different kind of attitude by some of the leading scientists, that is the problem really that our methodology, scientific methodology, which we have been using all these days, has no doubt succeeded, but whether there are alternatives to the existing methodology of science, because wherever we are finding, we are not able to solve the problem, it may be, that is I think as I was telling you this morning, if you take the simple question of the wave particle aspect of behavior of particles and waves, we can't understand with our mind how the same entity can be both particle and wave. One is a small confined thing, the other is an extended thing, etc. But at the same time, we cannot proceed there without Bohr's philosophy, that complementarity. You assume that both are possible, which is against our own other ideas about things. We can't say that this can be both this and that simultaneously. So when you say simultaneously, the question of time comes. So whether that idea is right, simultaneous idea of simultaneity and idea of progress of time. In these things Einstein proved that some of these concepts which we think are universal are really not so. You got example of rate of flow of time is different in the neighborhood of a neutron star, because somehow gravitational wave is interfering. Gravitational effects are interfering with the rate of flow of time, with the nature of space. Space gets curved. So until the gravitation problem is solved, that may be the crux of the whole thing, science will have a problem. So one has to be open-minded regarding the methodology of science. This is where now some of the younger scientists who have spent the last 25, 30 years in theories like string theory, etc. They are wonderful mathematical theories. But the question is why, string theory was proceeding in a particular direction, and they found that the same equations give rise to 1,500 solutions, or even more, million solutions. So that means it becomes useless, will kind of. But mathematics is rigorous, and so there are problems like this. The relation between mathematics and science. Yeah. So, but philosophy, the methodology is different, and the methodology is based more on analysis, different states of mind. What I analyze, a super mind will analyze differently. And experience is the most important thing. Whether your nature of experience changes and whether that is going to help us to solve some of these problems. That is what, when we talk about Ramana Maharshi or Vivekananda, any of these people, what is the difference between them and us? Their experience was different. And they think that there is a methodology for that, how to go about doing that. So I think there has to be tolerance of philosophy, even in scientific institutions.
Thank you very much for your time and for this illuminating conversations. We really thank you from the bottom of our heart. Thank you very much, sir.